See, this sucks right here. Yeah, I'm just saying this length of this cord right here kind of hinders us. Try How bad of a shot is that? Yeah, I know. Well, does that look awful? Is it way too close with two guys sitting here? Not that there's much we can do, but is it as far like out as it'll go on the zoom? Well,
Core's got to go over the table, I think.
Like closer, right?
That's not too bad.
You going? Okay. Hello everybody and welcome to March Madness Preview, a show where you'll hear everything you wanted to hear and lots more about the upcoming NCAA tournament. We're here at Champion Sports Bar on the San Antonio Riverwalk, where scores of screaming fans have gathered to celebrate the upcoming March Madness. March Madness! Yeah. Listen to that roar. Hello everybody, I'm James Short and I'll be your host for today's show. With me is guest analyst Peter Schwedhelm. Peter's an assistant coach at Schreiner College. Schreiner has experienced a little March Madness of their own, coming off a big win this weekend over Texas Lutheran. Tell us about that, Peter.
Well, James, Texas Lutheran is one of the top 30 teams in the nation, and we've been struggling to say the least this year. And the manner in which we won was we hit a 3 at the buzzer to win by 1. It was definitely the highlight of the season.
Sounds like you guys have had a little March Madness already. Congratulations. What we're going to do today is take you through all the teams that may or may not be participating in the upcoming NCAA tournament and offer our predictions for who will succeed and who will be sent home early. Speaking of success, Sports Illustrated started off the year putting Cincinnati's Danny Fortson on the cover of their college basketball preview magazine and saying that the road to the national championship would lead through Cincinnati. At this point in the year, everyone, and we're going to go ahead and jump on the bandwagon, is saying that the road to the national championship definitely leads through Lawrence, Kansas. Peter, what do you think about that?
Well, Kansas has shown throughout the year that they are by far the team to beat the NCAA tournament. They're strong inside, they're strong outside. I tell you what, Rape LaFrenz is going to be the player of the year this year in the Big 12, and deservedly so. Jacques Vaughn and Jared Hass is as good as the defensive backcourt as you're going to find in the whole nation. And the one thing they had this year that they really haven't had ever before is a consistent threat at the 3 spot. Paul Pierce is for real. If Paul Pierce came out, he'd probably be a top 15 pick in the draft. Kansas is absolutely the team to beat.
Kansas has looked strong all year, and as you said, Paul Pierce has really given them that extra, that scoring threat, that explosive player on offense that has really put them over the top. They are the most solid team in the country, 1 through 5, I think it's safe to say. And Kansas is leading in the Big 12 Conference, having lost only 1 conference game and boasts a 28-1 overall record. Going down the rest of the Big 12, who else do you see receiving possible NCAA bids, Peter?
Well, I think there are several teams that have bids locked up. Texas Tech, for one, by beating Texas Saturday night, I believe has locked up a bid. Texas Tech, in fact, is one of my picks as a sleeper in the NCAA tournament. I feel like they're very, very strong inside with Tony Battie, averages about 19 points and 12 rebounds. And Corey Carr is one of the better guards in America. A lot of people don't know about him. He's leading the Big 12 in scoring this year at 21 points a game. Stanley Bonhams is a heck of a shooter. Texas Tech looks real solid. Iowa State also looks really solid. And Texas apparently is on the bubble, and they could end up on the outside looking in.
Well, you've mentioned about 5 teams there: Kansas, Texas Tech, Iowa State, and Texas is a possibility. What do you think about Colorado?
Well, Colorado's got a good team. I think they're young. I think they're a couple years away. I watched them play in their gym several times this year, and they're a much different team than they are on the road. They've lost to Kansas by 8 points at home in Colorado, and they lost to Kansas by over 40 points in Lawrence. That's usually the sign of a young team that's not quite ready to make their run.
Well, it looks like in the Big 12 that what will happen this year is Kansas will lead a dominant attack into the tournament, followed by other teams, Colorado, Iowa State, Texas Tech, that could give some teams a scare, but probably will receive no higher than a 6 or a 7 bid going into the tournament. Well, I guess moving on, we'll take a look at the Southeastern Conference, which has had a number of surprises this year. First and foremost being Kentucky's. They certainly have not had a disappointing season, currently at 27-3, but I don't know, going into the tournament without Derek Anderson, a lot of people think that the first time they face a team that forces them to shoot and they're not shooting well, that they could get knocked off.
Well, a lot of people have been saying that. Derek Anderson's loss definitely hurts Kentucky very badly. But Kentucky's still a very deep, very experienced team. Anthony Epps is a heck of a shooter. Ron Mercer's got that type of range. Jared Prickett has that type of range. If Jared Prickett can come back and have the type of year as he had his freshman year, which prompted Billy Packer to call him the next Larry Bird, Kentucky's still got a very good chance to go a long, long ways in the tournament.
Let's talk for a minute about the surprise of the SEC this year, South Carolina. The Gamecocks have lost only one conference game this year, sweeping Kentucky in the season series, earning them the SEC regular season title outright. Who do you like on the Gamecocks this year, Peter?
B.J. McKee and Larry Davis are two experienced guards. Both of them average in the neighborhood of 18 points a game. South Carolina has got some of the better guard play in all of college basketball right now, James. I do see them running into problems, though, in the NCAA tournament because they do not score on the block at all. And I tell you what, I don't think I've ever seen a team win an NCAA championship with no scoring from the inside. I think South Carolina's in trouble.
So low post scoring could be a problem in the tournament, but South Carolina has played tenacious, tough defense all season long and proven to be a tough-minded team playing a tough SEC schedule. Anybody else other than Kentucky and South Carolina in the SEC that you look at to make some noise in the tournament?
Well, certainly. Georgia, Tubby Smith is one of the finest basketball coaches in the entire nation. I think they're 21-7. They're in third place in the SEC. They've got some solid backcourt play and a pretty fine center. Mississippi has also probably got an NCAA tournament lock. Their strength is a gentleman from Houston named Ansu Cisse, who's a sophomore. He's an inside-out Derek McKee, Detlef Schrempf type player. Mississippi's going to be tough too, definitely.
Okay, let's move on now and go to Conference USA. It's been an up and down season in Conference USA. Cincinnati was a lot of people's preseason pick to be the #1 seed in the country, and it's pretty safe to say that they've had a disappointing season based on their preseason expectations. They have an All-American, one of the best players in the country, and Danny Fortson, and just a solid all-around lineup that has really not lived up to expectations. And maybe if we're going to start with Cincinnati's disappointments, we might want to start with Damon Flint.
Yes, Damon Flint has not had the type season expected from him. His scoring is way down. He averages about 10 points a game. He does, however, have a 2-to-1 assist-turnover ratio, as does their backup point guard, Charles Williams, sophomore, I believe. Cincinnati definitely has been a disappointment. They lost to Temple by 15. They lost to South Carolina, which is the game people point to as, other than the two Kentucky games, as South Carolina's main strengths. Cincinnati's been a disappointment all the way around, including a recent loss to Memphis.
Speaking of Memphis, that's another team that many people coming into the season probably thought were going to have a little bit more success overall, and with currently a 16-13 overall record, haven't really lived up to expectations also. One surprise in Conference USA has been North Carolina Charlotte, who have jumped to a 9-4 conference record, bringing them to 18-7 overall, and look like a good bet at this point to get a tournament bid. Other teams, Tulane, a 20-win season. They look like they have a pretty good shot to make the tournament. Anybody else you like in Conference USA?
Well, Tulane's definitely got a good chance, if for no other reason. Gerald Honeycutt's a heck of a player. Memphis has definitely had a disappointing season. I think that's due in no small part to the unfair way in which Larry Finch has been treated there. His players are very resentful toward the administration for firing him early in the season, and I think that's really hurt Memphis's chances. As for UNC Charlotte, I feel like they've really just benefited from the Conference USA teams being disappointing as a whole. They will get an NCAA tournament bid, but I do not see them making it to the Sweet 16.
Other teams in Conference USA, Louisville at 22-7 has looked solid. Marquette at 17-8 will probably not receive a bid. I don't know. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think that Marquette should get into the tournament. They play, I think, the best half-court man-to-man defense in all of college basketball, and they have played a very tough schedule. They did split with Cincinnati, which speaks something. And other than that, Louisville has had a very good season as well. In fact, some people would argue that Kentucky's 20-point win over Louisville is yet another reason why Kentucky can compete for a title.
Do you think that Conference USA, that any of those teams will be hurt by the number of teams in that conference that, you know, could get consideration for the tournament? Do you think that that will maybe hurt a couple of teams and maybe keep somebody from getting a bid that deserves one?
I think especially when considering how new Conference USA is to college basketball, they definitely do not get the respect they deserve. And I do think that the Marquettes of the world will get shortchanged this year undeservedly.
Let's move on now to the Big Ten, which has one of the biggest surprises of the country in Minnesota. The Golden Gophers have had an incredible run this year with a 26-2 overall record, having lost only one game in the conference and having easily secured the conference title at this point. Other Big Ten teams have been somewhat disappointing. Purdue, 16-11 overall. Wisconsin and Iowa have both had average seasons and are probably have a good shot at making the tournament, probably will make the tournament, but, you know, what has come over Minnesota this year? How have they managed to just storm through the Big Ten playing, you know, a Big Ten schedule in itself is tough. To only lose one game going through that schedule, they must be doing something right. What's the difference between this year's Minnesota team and teams of the past?
Well, I would say defense. They really get after it on the defensive end of the floor. They're an experienced ball club. Bobby Jackson, Sam Jacobson, both fine players, averaging over 15 points and 7 rebounds a game. Plus, Clem Haskins is a heck of a coach. And I do think that Minnesota has benefited from the fact that the Big Ten is down, period. I understand that Michigan has as much talent as anybody in the nation, but they haven't performed up to expectations. I believe if Minnesota was playing in the ACC, they'd still have a winning record, but they certainly wouldn't only have one loss.
Let's talk about Michigan for just a minute here. Michigan has some of the best players in the country under the basket, and for some reason just haven't been able to get it done this year. They stand at 17-10 overall and a disappointing 7-8 record in the conference. What do you think it'll take for Michigan to step it up, make the tournament, and make some noise? They do have, you know, a number of players who could step it up at tournament time, and, you know, they're really not a team that you want to face at the seed that they probably will receive.
Well, I think they'll probably get into the tournament. I do not think they deserve to get in. Like I said, the Big Ten is down this year. They are 7-8 in conference, but they do have one of the more talented teams around, and if they do get in, and I was a 5 seed, I certainly wouldn't want to see them in the first round. Michigan's real problem has been outside shooting. They have some of the better athletes in the nation. They have Maurice Taylor, who's a fine shooting guard slash power forward, kind of a Juwan Howard type. Maceo Baston's one of the best shot blockers in the nation. And Tractor Trailer's as good a rebounder as there is in the Big Ten. But Michigan does not deserve to get in. They have not lived up to expectations.
Let's talk about Indiana for a minute, another Big Ten team that hasn't played poorly. They have a 21-9 overall record, but maybe haven't done as well as they would have liked this year. What do you think about their possibilities in the tournament?
Well, they're so young this year. Andre Patterson is only a junior, and he's by far their most experienced player and their best player too. They have a lot of first-year guys that can really play, and this team's going to do some damage to people in years to come. This is not their year, but they will get in. They do deserve to get in. Bobby Knight will not get shafted with the 21-win season. I can promise you that.
Other Big Ten teams that have a shot to make the tournament or will make the tournament, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Purdue both have a shot. I really don't see Wisconsin getting in just by the sheer number of teams that there are in the Big Ten, that could make the tournament even in an off year. I could see them getting as many as 6 bids in what has been a relatively weak conference this year. Big Ten teams have been fairly disappointing in recent years in the tournament. Do you see any reason for that to change this year, even with the type of year that Minnesota has had?
Well, Minnesota is a very confident basketball club right now. They did beat Clemson convincingly. I could easily see Minnesota going to the grade 8, if not the Final Four. They have a very balanced ball club. Indiana's got a shot to make the Sweet 16. Other than that, I really don't see a Big Ten team getting out of the second round.
Well, let's move on to the Big East now. And the Big East has had a number of teams in the Big East have had solid years. Georgetown, Syracuse coming off their huge run last year, Villanova, Providence. There are a number of teams in the Big East that have had solid years and should be looking forward to tournament bids. Who do you like to make the tournament in the Big East?
I think Georgetown's got it locked up. John Thompson has a very solid reputation. They've got a very good basketball club. Victor Page is leading the Big East in scoring. And they are 18-8. I think they'll definitely get in. Villanova will definitely get in with 21 wins and probably the freshman of the year in college basketball in Tim Thomas. I think Providence has a bid sewn up. I think that Syracuse deserves to get in. I think that the committee will consider that Todd Bergen missed almost all of the year, and they have been on fire as of late. Other than that, I think Boston College and West Virginia have an outside chance, but I do not see either one of them getting in.
Okay, let's talk about Villanova for a minute because that is an interesting team. Tim Thomas, as you mentioned, probably the top high score recruit from a year ago and has lived up to expectations this year. Really helped Villanova's team after losing Kerry Kittles, an All-American, to the NBA draft. Do you think that Villanova has a shot to maybe turn it on in the tournament? They've had a 21-win year. They've got some young talent and some older guys that have been around. What do you think about their prospects in the tournament?
Well, Alvin Williams has not had the type of year people were hoping he would have, and Jason Lawson's probably had his worst year at Villanova, and those are their two experienced guys. I don't see Villanova doing anything in the tournament. I will say, however, that Providence is my other dark horse team for this year's tournament along with Texas Tech. They are so solid at all 5 positions. God Shamgod is one of the better playmakers in college basketball. Jamel Thomas and Derek Brown are 2 very solid wings. Ruben Garcias is an outstanding rebounder. And Austin Crocier is going to be a lottery pick. Austin Crocier can play basketball. Pete Gillen's a great coach. Look for Providence to go places in the tournament.
And finally in the Big East, Syracuse, a team that probably will get into the tournament but will struggle, will be a team that is considered to not make it. They have all the experience in the world coming off last year's win. They have the confidence. No one thought that they would do what they did last year. Do you think there may be a team that can knock somebody off, maybe not make it to the Final Four, the grade 8, but maybe upset somebody?
Syracuse would definitely be one of those teams that could do it. Providence, obviously, also I feel they could. And, Villanova could. I kind of wrote them off early, but they do have a lot of talent. I'm not going to pick them to get out of the Sweet 16 for sure, but potentially, talent-wise, they definitely could.
Let's move on to the Pac-10 now, a conference that has had a pretty solid year. UCLA, Arizona has had some injuries and problems that have kept them from becoming the team that a lot of people thought they would be this year. But they've got their team back, they're healthy, they've had a decent conference schedule at 10-5. What do you think about Arizona in the tournament?
Well, I think that as Mike Bibby goes, so goes Arizona. He's a great freshman, but he is a freshman. Plus, Arizona has a history. I mean, Lute Olson's a fine coach, I'm sure, but they have a history of going out early with very, very talented teams. When Mike Bibby doesn't play well, Arizona loses, period. I do not look for them to do much in the tournament.
UCLA looks to be a team that could receive as high as maybe a 3 seed in the West, and they started off the year rough. They came on, they finished really strong in the conference at 13-3, and will most likely win the Pacific 10 Conference. What do you think about UCLA's team? Maybe another team that with some veterans that have been around, Charles O'Bannon, Toby Bailey, a couple of guys that have been there, have had tournament experience, have had experienced great success in the tournament. What do you think about UCLA?
UCLA has got a shot to go very, very deep in the postseason. They are so talented, it's amazing, and they're just coming off a great win against Duke, who's also been on fire, and it also has a chance to go deep into the NCAA tournament. UCLA's got Cameron Dollar, a senior playmaker, a fine leader on the floor. Toby Bailey, as good a shooting guard as there probably is in America, other than perhaps Dedrick Willoughby of Iowa State. J.R. Henderson is a junior. He's been to war before. He was an integral part of the '95 championship team. And, of course, they got Charles O'Bannon, the All-American, a senior. Look for UCLA to do some damage in the tournament.
Other teams in the Pac-10 that look to make the tournament, Cal, with sporting a 19-8 overall record, will most likely make the tournament. Stanford, playing well down the stretch, also has a good chance to receive a tournament bid. Other than that, in the Pacific 10, it looks like Arizona and UCLA would probably be the 2 teams that you could look for in the tournament to knock somebody off or go deep into the postseason. Finally, we're going to turn to the conference that has been unquestionably the best in the nation this year. That's the Atlantic Coast Conference. The ACC has remarkable teams every year, but this year it just seems like everybody, every team has come together, has been playing well, and has really made it a miserable conference to play basketball in terms of having a tough game every night you go out. This weekend, Florida State, one of the lower teams in the ACC, knocked off Wake Forest, at the time the number 5 team in the nation, which just shows you what a war it is going out every night when you're playing in the ACC. The ACC has a number of teams, over half the conference, that will make the tournament, and a couple of teams that figure to have about as good a shot as anybody of knocking off Kansas. Who do you like in the ACC?
Well, they have 4 teams in Clemson, Wake Forest, North Carolina, and Duke, who have a legitimate chance to knock off Kansas in the tournament. They're so solid from top to bottom. It's amazing. From a fan's perspective, as a basketball fan, if I was going to go to any college around right now, it'd be an ACC school. The talent level in the ACC this year is just phenomenal. And the amazing thing is that this is Joe Smith's senior year. This is Rasheed Wallace's senior year. This is Jerry Stackhouse's senior year. The ACC could be even more talented than it is. It's frightening.
As the ACC tournament gets underway this week, it could prove to be just as exciting as the NCAA tournament itself. You're going to see a lot of great matchups, a lot of teams that know each other well, have played each other, and possible matchups like Virginia and Duke, where teams throughout the season know they can compete, are fighting for a tournament bid, a team like Virginia, and who knows what can happen. 2 years ago in the ACC tournament, one guard, Randolph Childress, virtually picked Wake Forest up on his back and carried it to the tournament title. Do you see a lower team in the conference maybe doing that this year, since the conference is so deep?
Well, definitely. Florida State's got a lot of talent, as does Virginia. Virginia's sitting at 17-11. They could be on the outside looking in, except that Terry Holland is one of the bigwigs on the selection committee, and he was the head coach at Virginia for around 20 years. And he said he will consider the officials' blown call in the Duke-Virginia game that possibly cost Virginia that game, which would put them at 500 in the conference and would put them at 18-10, and would certainly give them a bid. Look for Virginia to get in and look for them to upset somebody early.
North Carolina, after getting off to an 0-3 start in the conference, has really come on. They have a strong 11-5 conference mark and have been unbeatable in the last few weeks in the ACC. they're a team that has really played better in the second half of the season, and maybe someone that has a lot of confidence going into the tournament. What do you think about North Carolina's chances this year?
Well, I tell you what, Antoine Jamison might be the third best power forward in basketball behind Cincinnati's Danny Fortson and Utah's Keith Van Horn. He is an awesome, awesome basketball player. Vince Carter, athletically, is as gifted as anybody around. North Carolina could cause some serious, serious problems for anybody they see in the tournament, Kansas included, because they do have the talent and they do have Dean Smith.
Wake Forest, another team, has the best player in the nation in Tim Duncan, and that's a bold statement to make, but you know, he's really been someone that may have been the top pick in the NBA draft for 3 years now. And he's stayed healthy, he's stayed productive. Everyone knows that he's going to be big and that they're going to have to stop him, and he still has had numerous double-doubles in nearly every game he's played this year, and has continued to be the shot-blocking presence, the rebounding presence, and has developed an offensive game to go around the incredible athleticism which he came into the game with. What do you think about Wake Forest as maybe one of those teams that could play well, a veteran team, guys that have been there and have been to the tournament, haven't done as well in the tournament in the past as they would have liked, but they have a lot of guys, Sean Allen, Ricky Peral, who could maybe, you know, step up and help Tim Duncan carry this team to a Final Four berth?
Well, I do think Tim Duncan is the best player in college basketball, bar none, by far. There isn't even an argument to be made for anybody else. I heard one moron call in and say Rafe LaFrentz was the player of the year in college basketball, but I mean, the host just hung up on him as soon as he even said that. Tim Duncan's the best player in the land. He can do it all. He can handle the ball in the open court. He can dish. He's a great shot blocker. Offensively, when he gets the ball, he's very hard to stop. Wake Forest's problem is their guard play. Tony Rutland, as good a shooter as he is, he's a little bit inconsistent, and he's not a point guard. I do not see him handling pressure defense of Jacques Vaughn, the pressure defense that Kentucky's going to put on you. Tim Duncan's going to see lots of double teams, and they just flat out don't give him the ball enough, I don't think.
And speaking of Tony Rutland at guard, he's been injured a lot of the year, and it'll be interesting to see how he stands up to playing the back-to-back, night-after-night games you have to play, first in the ACC tournament and then in the NCAAs. So you think that the key to Wake Forest making a run in the tournament might just be finding a way to get Tim Duncan the ball every time down the court?
Absolutely, absolutely. If I was coaching Wake Forest, I would have a rule. If you took a shot before Tim Duncan, unless it was a breakaway layup, if you took a shot before Tim Duncan touched the ball at least once, you would be on the bench, maybe for the rest of the night.
So we've talked about Wake Forest, North Carolina, Florida State, Virginia, maybe a team with something to prove certainly going into the ACC tournament. They feel they were robbed in the Duke game earlier this year. Duke at the top of the ACC, you certainly can't count them out. They've played a solid year all year long, rebounding from last year's disappointing season. Clemson, another team that was very high up in the polls earlier in the season, and you know, they're a talented team. Who knows what they'll do. It looks to be a very interesting ACC tournament and a great NCAA tournament this year. I think a lot of people were really worried that with the number of underclassmen that have left school in the last few years, that maybe college basketball will be a little bit down this year. As you mentioned, think of how incredible the ACC would be this year if all of their senior players were still in school. It wouldn't even be funny. And I think that the college basketball has really had a solid year overall in proving that you're still going to have great conferences, you're still going to have great matchups, and you still are going to see the marquee players, the Danny Fortsons, the Tim Duncans, the Ron Mercers, you know, guys that, you know, are great players, are going to stay in school. You know, there still are going to be those guys who are committed to both getting an education and playing 4 years of college basketball. So I think it's really been a good year for NCAA basketball as a whole. Anybody else that we haven't covered going through the conference? I know we haven't really talked about Utah, but as we enter the final minutes here, any other final thoughts on the tournament?
Well, Utah could make it to the grade 8 possibly, but Keith Van Horn, as great as he is, and I mean he is great, he will be a fine basketball player in the NBA. He can't put Utah on his back and carry him to a championship. And as far as what you were saying about college basketball not being hurt too badly by the departures, I think you're right, and I do think that the ACC has completely saved college basketball this year.
It really has, and I look forward personally to watching those games. You know, you never know who's going to come out and win the ACC tournament. It could be anybody from Duke all the way down to Florida State. So it should be an exciting week of conference tournaments, and as we get ready for Sunday's selection show, where we will find out just which teams will be in the 64-team field for the NCAA tournament. We've had an interesting half hour of discussion here, and I think that maybe everyone out there has learned just a little bit as they get ready for the selection show and get ready to experience March Madness for themselves. We've been here in Champion Sports Bar on the Riverwalk, and we thank them for letting us hold the show here. For Peter Schwedhelm, guest analyst, I'm your host, James Short, and we'll see you next year on March Madness Preview.